Henri, welcome to the show. I'm so happy
Okay,
to have you.
my pleasure.
The co-author of Liberating Structures. Um, and yeah, diving into liberating structures, life, facilitation, whatever that means. And I always start with the same question. I already warned you, so we have rehearsed.
Oh,
When did you start calling yourself a facilitator? And actually, do you?
that question. I was wondering what you were talking about. Well, I've never called myself a facilitator because I'm not a facilitator. So why should I lie?
Mm.
And so I have spent time with facilitators. I think Keith, my partner, and is one of the best, probably in the profession. And so I've spent time with him and we've done a few things together. And so I have some idea about what facilitation consists of. And what I do not know, because I don't have the experience, I don't have a sense of the range of what people do and how, you know, and the variety and of course the range of quality as well. So on that, from that standpoint, I'm quite ignorant because I don't have the practice. I don't work. I am
And
so he is a consultant and he works. I don't. Uh, whatever work we've done together that was paid early on in the days of Plexus Institute was given away to the institute. So I I was retired, so I didn't need to work.
and what was your initial motivation or inspiration to come up with liberating structures, which have become the fundamental pieces for many, many facilitators all over the world?
Well, I think that it's it wouldn't be right to say that there was some clear intention from the beginning. It's more like it happened, yeah. And so there is not a decision. There is more like an evolution, that we kind of we got pushed, we fell into it, we got pushed into it, and I'm not sure what I have shared with you, but when I retired from Merck in, I don't want to remember how many years ago it is because it's depressing, but I shortly after that, and again, a little bit accidentally, I ended up being a founder of an institute that was called Plexus Institute that was devoted to spreading information and ideas and consequences about complexity science and how this was relevant to organizations. And I got quite interested in that. And so as part of what the work of the Institute was doing was we had workshops on very different variety of topics, AIDS, big subjects, and sometimes more professional, activity kind of, and people would come and attend the workshop, and they would love what we are doing, and they would love the ideas, and they would love the concepts of complexity science and how relevant it was to describe the way organizations work. Mm-hmm. So what I discovered, though, after along the way, was that ideas are great, but what do you do? How do you translate that into actions? Okay. And so part of the story was that those structures were precisely that. They were ways of translating into action the notion or the concept, if you want, that organizations are complex systems and not machines that you can direct and control from the top. And that they were not predictable either. Okay, so the question was, if that is true, then what do you do? How do you make decisions? How do you manage people?
Can you manage people?
Yeah. How do you solve problems? Yeah, absolutely. And so it's out of this that emerged this. And we were fortunate that there were already a few things that were there, present, floating around, that people had already developed, that we could, either borrow or use or get inspiration from, and that kind of thing. And so that's one part of the story. And the other part of the story, do you want me to continue?
Yes, please. Yes, please. Now I'm curious what the other part is.
Well, the other part of the story is that we had one of the vice president that reported to me at Merck, and I had a dinner, and we talked about things that needed to be changed or improved in the way work was being done in the company. And more specifically, he was saying that, we need to change the way we interact with the medical profession. We are doing the same thing that we've been doing for forever, for decades. And it's not really good. We need to change. And so we had this wonderful conversation around the dinner table. You can imagine that. And at some point I said to him, you keep talking about this, but where are the ideas going to come from? And I said, clearly they will not come from the top, because if the top knew what to do,
they would already do it.
Yeah. And so they have to come from the bottom. And now comes the question, how will they come from the bottom? How will they come from the frontline people? What are something needs to change in order to give them the tools and the freedom to generate ideas that could be, good and useful and practical. And so we started on this thing. And so we did a workshop with some other management people together with Keith. And then we were asked to come to Brazil and do a big workshop for a large group of people instead of a small management group. Yeah. And we said, no, we don't want to go. We don't want to go to Brazil. We don't want to travel and do that kind of thing. And so we kind of got pushed into a corner of, okay, we'll come, but we'll come only once, because that was the thing that we were concerned about, that we were getting our fingers into, if we said yes, that we would end up, okay, we say yes to that, then you have to continue. You say number 1, number 2 session, and so forth. So we say, okay, we'll come, and we'll come once, and that's it. Then we don't come back. So because of that, we ended up saying, okay, see, if we're going to go there once, we have to really pack that workshop. So we picked pretty much all the structures that we knew and whatever we had already worked on, and sort of, and went to that workshop. It was 3 days with people from top to bottom, from the vice president of the region all the way down to the sales representative. And there were few people from some other countries. And this thing turned out into an amazing session for everybody, including us. I mean, we had no idea what to expect. We were just sort of, we're going to share everything we know. And it was fantastic, because it changed the dynamics of that group very quickly.
Mm.
So he was, what is it, like 6, 7 level, and and
In
so in the
hierarchies, you mean?
pardon,
In hierarchy, you mean? 7 levels of hierarchy.
something like that. And so when we started the first morning, the sales representative, were very quiet, yeah, because they were in little groups, and so they were very little. By the afternoon, it was already of the first day was already different, and the noise level in that room just went up, dramatically. Okay, and it was an amazing experience for everybody, and we were flabbergasted. Because we had no, we went there without expectations. Yeah, we went there with okay, we're going to give this to you, and and it went on late in the evenings, at the bar, discussions and so forth, and so at the end of the 3 days, everybody that was there said that we have never experienced anything like that. And some of it was shocking. I mean, there were some difficult moments, particularly for the management people,
What sense?
because because with the use of the structure, they were now on equal footing with everybody else. No power. What little power they had was in the little group. That's not much. Okay. So it was a surprise, and there were some people from some other countries who were just as amazed as everybody else, to say, "Hey, I want a workshop like this in my country." And so we got our arms twisted, and we went to another country and did another workshop, and it was the same kind of, in some way, revelation, because we didn't know this was possible. And so, the first one is an accident, the second one is a coincidence, then we did a third one, and the third one was just as good. And then you start saying, okay, we've got something different here. And so I want to point to you that I am talking about the workshop with a whole group of structure, as opposed to individual structures. So we knew what the separate structures could do. Something we had no experience of what would happen when you took a whole bunch of them together.
Yeah.
Okay.
And maybe for the audience who might not be familiar with the wording, so a structure is an activity that you do with a group.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 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 And
so this means for the first time you did a sequence of the structures to facilitate. What was the initial purpose that this group came together? Was it really to move or to get ideas from the bottom on how to change the organization?
yeah, I think the idea was to to give each of those organizations a set of tools that they could use to transform themselves. So not a facilitation session. This was a
Training.
a training session, literally, or teaching session, if you want, whatever. Okay. And it was feasible only because those structures are simple enough. Okay. That if you have done it once and you get the instruction, you know what it looks like, and you can do it, essentially.
And by simple, you mean that they're very easy to explain.
They're very easy to do. and they are, and so that was the beginning of the whole thing, in the sense that we had done some stuff together, but that was the first time that it was, in some way a block like this. And of course, we got pushed into, you have to document this, you have to write it down so that we can, etc., etc. I mean, we had done some of it for the workshop itself, but and this went on for a while, and of course the pressure got bigger and bigger. You have to write it up, you have to write it up, you have to write a book, and we kept saying, we're not writing a book. That's we'll give you something for the workshop. And then we had some idea of what it is involved in writing a book and the pain that it represents. So and this went on for a couple of years, and finally we gave up. We gave in and say, okay, we're going to write a book.
Beautiful.
And so that's the story behind it, and that took us a couple of years. And so that's the story behind the Liberating Structure. It wasn't something, people ask us, where does this come from? It didn't. It just happened. We had no intentions of developing something like that and writing a book and publishing it and spreading it around. It just happened. We were, so, there is no genius involved in, like, we had those brilliant ideas that we're going to reduce and we're going to change the world. It was really, maybe call it the labor of love. I mean, we were very, very interested in the subject. We were involved in that institute, and we really believed in that. I mean, that this was a real issue, that the way organizations are managed and the basic beliefs that exist behind it were wrong.
And what do you think are the structures, maybe not uncovering, but making possible that was impossible? Inclusion
and participation. And so that is because if you look at the way we get work done, at least I'm speaking from the experience of being in a large organization. We work by exclusion. If you look at the meetings and who participates, it's always a select group of people. And most of the people that are affected by what is being discussed or decided are not in that room. And when you have if you have a problem to solve, the traditional way of doing that is you create a task force, and so you go after, say, who are the 5 smartest people on this topic that we can bring together, and that's the team. And this may be since it is an important subject, it is likely that it is affecting hundreds of people, depending on the size of the organization, if not thousands or whatever. They're not there.
Do you think it's a matter of fear of the complexity to involve, or is it a matter of power?
No, we haven't learned how to do it. It's that simple. I worked for Merck for 30 years. I went very high up in the organization, one level to the CEO. Never heard or did anything like this ever. And so I had a problem in my meetings. I did not, my meetings were, I believed at least that they were better than most, because I was, relaxed, and I had great relationship with the people that worked for me and so forth. So they were not, they were quite informal, but it was still not smooth, and it was still not efficient, and not inclusive. Certainly, they were very traditional about who was going to be there, and I did try to be more inclusive, but the technology at the time wasn't good enough. and it didn't work. And so, I had people reporting to me all over the world, and I was trying to get people to talk to each other. It was very difficult.
Mm.
So I believe that's the issue. The first thing, we don't know. We do not know how to collaborate. We don't learn.
Or we have unlearned it.
We what?
We unlearned it somehow along the way, because children somehow can collaborate.
Yeah, I'm not talking about that we don't know to collaborate on a one-on-one basis, or that's I mean, some people do, some people don't, etc. So that's more that we don't know to collaborate at scale.
Yeah,
we learn how to do that, and the way we collaborate is not efficient and not effective. So it's not, if you think of those structures, they are very simple. We don't learn anything like that.
And I think what makes it so effective is that it allows large group of people to talk to each other, so that the most important pieces of information kind of bubble to the surface.
Yes, there is that. It allows also the surprising things to show up, because by putting all those people together, you create a large number of unexpected interactions. Okay, and here and there are sparks. So the idea, I mean, think of, 2510, right? Okay.
I know it. Would you like to briefly explain it for the audience who might know it?
I mentioned this as an example because it's amusing. 2510 is a way to extract the best ideas from a group. And what it consists of is of the way it is done. You ask, let's say you have a group of 50 people. So everybody is standing up and everybody has a card on which they asked to write what is the best idea that you have to attack problem XYZ. Okay. And what would be the first step? So everybody writes that. And then, just to cut the description short, you pass those cards around so that people end up with cards they don't know from who they are. There are no names on anything. And everybody rates the card, the idea that they have in their hand, from 1 to 5. And then you pass them around again, and then you have a second score and a third and so forth. You do this 5 times. Okay. So at the end of that, whoever is facilitating that ask a very simple question. Who has 25, which is the maximum possible score that anybody can get? So if there is one, whoever has that particular card reads what the idea is, and you work your way down 24, 23, and so forth. So, and you do that for 5 or 6, and then you publish the rest of it. But I'm going very quickly because I don't want to take time on this, but it's a very easy way to collect ideas from a group of people. And of course, it's not predictable from whom the best ideas are coming from. And so when you have a group with many levels present in the room, it is very common for the best idea not to come from the top of the organization. At least the best idea as judged by everybody in that room. Okay?
Yeah.
And so this is one example of, how you get diverse voices. But you do that also with the fact that you are doing most of the work when you use liberating structure in small groups of 2 or 4. That's where it starts. And then it is moves up and is shared with the rest of the group. And because of that, you get the voices of all kinds of people. And very surprising things happen regularly.
Thank you for sharing that example.
Is this clear enough? I'm going very fast. Is what's clear enough?
Yes, I think it was
Okay.
perfectly clear. And as you said, we don't want to spend too much time on just how it works because people can read it up. What I find fascinating are the underlying principles to that. Because what, for me, the mindset that it brings is that there is a certain amount of chaos that you allow in this process. People walking around and sharing the cards with each other. Nobody knows who will share it with what, and it might be loud and messy. And there's another principle of flattening the room, trusting that the best idea will bubble up because the collective intelligence will ensure that the best idea get the highest rankings. So what were your
It's not a guarantee. When you use the word ensure, it sounds like,
thank you. Yeah.
I
Increases
would
the probability.
I would put it a little more differently, that it ensures that there is a greater participation, and the and contribution.
And
So there,
it encourages the conversation afterwards, because if someone shares an idea with 25 points and someone is persuaded that another idea might be better, there can be a healthy debate around it and contribution and a yes ending.
yeah, you don't necessarily have to make choices either.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to have more than one good idea, and it's a little, but there is some general benefits that are fundamental, in the sense that when you start working with this practical notion of being as inclusive as possible, it means that you are including in the development of what is going to be done the people that are going to implement it.
Mm.
And so the people that do the work will have been participants. So they have a completely different relationship, let's put it that way, with that idea or that project or that, than they would otherwise, when something is just dumped on them that comes from the top saying, this is what we're going to do, and they have, okay.
Yeah.
So the quality of implementation is completely different. The level of resistance to doing something different is completely different, etc. So it's a big deal. It's not just, do you have a good idea? Even if the ideas are exactly the same as they would have been otherwise, arriving at it with the participation and the contribution of everybody ends up creating a very different reality.
Yeah. And what I'm curious about is what was back then, or maybe hopefully still is, your concept or your belief in human beings to come up with something. So what is your underlying principle? What got you there? Especially, and I try to wrap my head around you being so high up in a hierarchy of a multinational company, and somehow believing in the wisdom of the group
Well,
to tackle complexity that is beyond those who actually lead the company.
I think I grew up like that as a manager. I think I was very lucky, because my first job as a manager was a country manager of Finland, which was a tiny organization that wasn't making any money. And I went there, and I had never been in a management position. This was a foreign country. Yeah.
You came from France.
Pardon?
You came from France back then.
No, I was
in the US.
Yeah, it was a long detour from France. I didn't come from France. I came I came from Denmark, and from Denmark I was from Canada, and Canada was from the US, and etc.
Okay.
The long, I left for 1 year France uh, as a student with a scholarship. So much for control, and
You never came back.
never. Well, except on vacation, of course. We go there regularly, but um, so where was I? Yeah, so I was suddenly manager of this very small organization in a foreign country with a language that I could learn a little, but I could not really function. And I didn't know the country, I didn't know what was going on, and so forth. So I was really dependent on the local people to get anything done. That's a very good way to learn to be a manager when you cannot do anything. It's fantastic training. Okay. In addition to that, I was young, I was very informal. We did quite a bit of work sitting on the floor. It was really, a tiny group. And I remember, developing advertising material, with things on the floor. And so it was very, very relaxed. And so I was the manager, but we were really more like a bunch of friends, working together, and we succeeded. We were very successful in dramatically changing that company very quickly and turning it around and doing things that had never been done in the country. And we had that as an objective, that we are going to be like no other pharmaceutical company in Finland. We're going to be different. Okay. And and I suppose I got lucky with some of the people that were there as well. And we had a ball. We really had a ball, and we were doing totally unconventional things, and it was a great success. And so I was there for a couple of years, and then I was appointed as regional director for Scandinavia. And so now I inherited 3 more countries, 2 of which were in very bad shape. And it sort of went on in the same style of working together. There was no sense of hierarchy in real sense, not from my part, at least. Okay, together at the same time about what to do, by talking about it and discussing it, and it was very much of a shared process, as opposed to I'm telling you what to do because I am the boss and I know what, I didn't know what the right thing was either, and so a lot of it was this participative process, and those countries were small enough that you could do that. And so I grew up like this for my first close to 10 years in the company. Not quite that many, okay? And so
that's a beautiful story, and I wonder, what then goes wrong in so many other, when we look at many other managers, this is not what we observe. And I can see the different building blocks that you as a manager had to have the humility to say, I need your support because I don't know, I'm in this country. You need to have the team who is actually competent enough to do that. And you do need the support from the organization that is also supporting that.
It was more that nobody knew what to do and that we had to figure it out together. It was more that kind of a thing. I mean, for many, for the things that ended up in discussion, it was that kind of a thing. And then there was the rest of the work which was okay, it's fine, we know what to do there. But for the things that really were discussion, and it was really animated. I remember I organized a Scandinavian meeting with so there was a general manager of each country, marketing manager, sales manager, and I think there were some sales supervisor also from some other countries. And so it was a good sized group. And of course, this had never been done. This was crazy because we had no idea what we were doing, but we were together. Okay? And we had a bunch of topics that people brought. You know, the way the agenda was made, I told people, bring stuff that you are, that is challenging, that you're struggling with, things that are meeting that you want to get discussed or you want to have decisions on what challenges. And so that's how the agenda, and it was crazy. I mean, people were really arguing and no and disagreeing and so forth. And it was a sort of a wild meeting, but very interesting, very productive. And we certainly learned also quite a lot about each other in the process. And so the personalities translated themselves into also principles. I remember there was one general manager from one particular country that was very much more of a top-down kind of thing. And boy, there were some really heated arguments, about what's right and what's wrong and that kind of thing. And so that's what I'm talking about a little bit, that we are, those were the discussions that took place either locally in the different countries or occasionally when we got together with more than one place. So it was that style of let's figure this out together that I grew up with in Scandinavia, with very sort of horizontal relationship with the people as opposed to vertical, and at least many of the people felt very comfortable disagreeing with me and arguing violently and so forth, and so then I moved to the headquarters eventually and found a completely different kind of management style and atmosphere and so on. So this is where some of this come from.
Because as you were describing this chaotic meeting with everyone bringing in their challenge, I was imagining the Troika consulting and seeing where it comes from, how to create a structure where the person receiving advice and consulting is forced structurally to shut up and to just listen.
Yeah.
And how this can then be liberating through the structure, because we don't have to be confronted with all these personalities and everything human getting into the way, making it complicated, so that we can focus on the work to be done.
Yeah. And this is in contrast to the Scandinavian meeting that I'm describing to you, which were a complete mess in some way. I mean, we're very productive in the end, but because there was no structure, there was just one structure, which was everybody together in one room.
And, everyone speaking at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, you can imagine. I mean, this was we're talking about maybe 30 people, that sort of number, and amount of shouting, and this was not a. So that's what I mean by we haven't learned. I did not know how to organize the discussion in that group at all. I had no idea. I had never seen anybody do anything different. So it's a so from that standpoint, I have that kind of very strong personal. When I talk about control, I have that kind of very strong personal experience and and a sense of the reality of what you know how much control you can have that really works. I mean, there is unproductive control. That's not difficult. And but the I have often said I wish I had known about liberating structure when I was in my job because I didn't know how to do that. And so eventually we got to good places because we took the time and I had good relationships and that kind of thing, you know. And but it was not efficient at all
And
or
what do you think?
effective.
And what do you think is the one thing, the basic thing that would then lead to all the change in terms of having more structured, productive meetings?
Well, the big thing is this very simple idea of doing most of the initial step of the work in small groups, which makes it possible to work what I call, you know, horizontally, if you want, you know. And so you can involve as many people as you want. Because if you first step takes 15 minutes, it's 15 minutes with 100 people, with 10 people, or with 1,000 people. It's the same amount of time.
Yeah.
And this is, you know, but we don't do that.
Isn't it
And
funny? And then it takes an engineer to
well, and you know,
decompose the system into its parts.
and the thing that is for me, like we on Zoom right now, which is fantastic, is that the technology today makes it possible to include anybody anywhere, which was not possible when I was working. I tried some of it, but it didn't work. And it's this is a huge deal because all those people that are elsewhere or that do not fit in the room because there is space for just 10 people in that conference room, you know, can be included. And that
Which,
changes.
yeah, it changes everything. On the other hand, it comes with then the different struggle that if there is no limit on how many we include, we really need to know how to how to facilitate these
How do you
groups and how
exactly?
to use technology in our favor, because the breakout rooms on Zoom, I think, make very large meetings even more effective and efficient than in person because of the
Uh, and it's also, I think, I think it's even easier to be safe in on the Zoom setup than in person. You know, because I
100%.
think that this issue of safe spaces is very real. You know, there are lots of people, and to some extent, everybody. You know, nobody will talk the same way or as freely as they will if they are in a space where they feel really safe to speak up.
Yeah.
And that's, uh, you know, that's a big deal because tremendous amount of contribution gets lost.
Mm. So
And
sorry.
yeah, the other aspect is that at least if I look at the way my brain functions, a lot of the idea, a lot of the thinking is stimulated by what you hear from other people. It makes you think of this or that. I mean, it's sort of like a ping pong kind of game, and it's. I mean, I was talking about the way I started when I was in Finland. I mean, that's the way we worked. We just bounced things off each other. And eventually something came out and I said, hey, this is good. Yeah, let's do it this way. But nobody at the beginning had that idea.
Mm.
And so the creativity is quite different when you change the structure, because you have the unpredictable aspect of interaction that create different possibilities, you know, that part of it is actually fun.
Yeah, and I think it's the combination of the unpredictability and the structure and the process. So the
Mm-hmm.
unpredictability that does not lead to uncertainty, where uncertainty is stressful and unpredictability leads to creativity and maybe even playfulness.
Yeah, I think that you need unpredictability, otherwise
You don't need to bring people together.
we have we have solved everything before we even start.
Yeah.
So it's but the the thing, what I missed when I left Scandinavia initially was the fun of
Mm.
working with a bunch of people that you're debating and arguing, and it was like working with a bunch of friends, and that is part of what is important, because it's important to enjoy work, and you can only enjoy work if you're interacting with people that you are enjoying the interaction, and it's not the it sounds very basic, but it's a huge deal, because you have lots of people who go through their entire life hating work.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. Every day they go to work and they hate it.
And from your experience, and maybe this could be a good bridge to see what then happened in the headquarters. You spoke about safe space, and I think as a leader, it's you are modeling this safe space, and it's basically up to the team leader or the manager to create the foundations. And then obviously safety, psychological safety is co-created by the entire group, but it is something you need to model. So how did you do that, or what is your take on psychological safety?
Well, so there are two different things here that you make me think of. One of them is the safety that you create yourself personally. Okay. That's one thing. The other one is the safety you create by the way you work. This is where liberating structures come in. So if
Mm.
you're the boss, you can be a schmuck, but if you use liberating structures, you create a lot of safe spaces for people to express themselves. So a lot of safety comes with the structure, because people are doing this work in small groups. And so it may not be 100% for all the groups, but most of the group, people will feel safe
Mhm.
because they are only with one or two or three other people. Okay. And then the structure themselves, the design, help making people comfortable. I mean, it is, the design itself is um, creates good conditions, and and it's short, and it's there is a number of different things that make it easy, but the other aspect, which is to create that thing yourself, that's much more difficult. That's the origin of my do's and don'ts. And I had, when I moved to the headquarters and started having a group of people, a group of departments that I was responsible for, I was having a very hard time to get input from people.
Mm.
I mean, not necessarily nuts and bolts kind of thing, but you know, people were trying to tell me, when I asked them, "What do you think?" They were trying to guess what I thought, so that they would, and
Mm.
they were afraid of speaking up. They were afraid of disagreeing with me, and my whole experience in Scandinavia was with disagreements. I mean, that's what we were doing all the time.
That's where
You
you
know,
thrive. Hmm.
yeah, that was the way we got somewhere, was to disagree with each other. That was part of the process, because once you agreed, it's finito. There was nothing else to talk about. And I was very frustrated, because I was surrounded with people who had mostly grown up there and were used to be, politically astute and careful about what they say and what they didn't say and so forth. And that's how I ended up producing those do's and don'ts in order to communicate with my departments and my teams and say, okay, this is what I believe. This is who I am trying to be, and the kind of person I'm not there, but that's my objective, to be like this, and let's talk about those things.
So you shared the list with your team members?
Yeah, I had separate meetings with each department. We went out. One of the things you will see in there is go out in the woods. We went out in the woods for a couple of days and we talked about each one of those things in there. Why, how come, where does it come from, and what are the stories behind, and do you agree, you disagree, why not, and so forth. So it was a turning point in my relationship with lots of people there. And
Beautiful. And do you think it was because it opened the door to understand how you function, your expectations?
Yeah.
The vulnerability or the predictability in terms of behavior and principles?
And in terms of, it gave a lot of permission to people to be different. And of course, it's not a switch that you turn, from one day to the other. I mean, that people will suddenly be completely different. But, that was the step. And then you have to grow into a different kind of relationship, which was a process that was different for every person. Obviously, some people just jumped into this and and others say, well, I don't really believe that, that's too good to be true or whatever, so it's but that list stayed with me for the rest of my career, for the next 20 years. And I took it across the world to all kinds of different countries that I was responsible for, and we had a great, I remember in Korea and places like that, having everybody in the room, and I would project this because we had projectors at that time. We didn't have computers, and people would ask questions. What does that mean? Why? Tell me a story about this, and it was very useful, very, very useful for me, because it was specific and in some way detailed.
And I can see how it helps you to have a North Star, to also follow your own principles and keep yourself accountable, because you're involving everyone else to keep you accountable.
Yeah. And it is, nobody's perfect. It's nice to have intentions. It's another thing to keep them. Keeping them is not always not that easy. I have good intentions every day, and like going to bed earlier and that kind of thing.
And I think that's also where it's important to see when is it important to stick to our intentions and principles, and when it makes sense to be flexible.
Yeah.
To allow emergence and whatever.
Well, and then transparency is a big thing. It's much easier to be forgiven if you are transparent.
Because we can relate to the humanity in someone else.
Yeah, and
it builds trust.
Yeah. And and we can much more easily recognize ourselves in other people. And because I mean, some of the difficulties that we have are very common, I think.
Yes. And I think that's also why the small groups and the short time, so the design around the liberating structures works so well because it's so aligned how humans function. If we're in a smaller group, we're more inclined to be ourselves, to be transparent, to relate to each other. If we don't have too much time, we don't get into the nitty-gritty details.
Yeah.
We get stuck on that.
And then at least my personal experience of finding myself in a breakout room with one or two other people that I have never met is amazingly effective. And it blows my mind every time how easily and quickly we start talking to each other, even though we don't know each other at all. It's I don't know. I don't know. There must be somebody who can explain that, but it happens time and time again for me. And I think that's a gift. I mean, this is something that really every organization should take advantage of because it's so good.
And I think it's difficult to believe if we haven't experienced it. And I wonder whether one part, I think there are two parts to it, why it works. That's my how I make sense of it. That in the physical space, we would never be as close to each other.
Yeah, like we are, like now, you and you.
Exactly. It's almost as if we would hug each other.
Yeah.
And still we have the distance with the screen. And there's we're both in our own personal space where we feel safe.
Yeah.
And nobody's listening in.
Yeah, there is. I think that excuse me, the one of the way that I smell, I would say, how good a meeting is by the level of noise.
What do you mean by that?
Well, if you have participation, it's noisy.
Mm-hmm.
Participation means there is a whole bunch of people that are talking at the same time. So it's noisy. So if you walk into a room and there is only one voice, you know that there is no participation. There is no inclusion. And that's the classroom. That's the way, I was saying that we don't learn how to collaborate because the way we go to school is we don't collaborate in school. And if collaboration was and inclusion and participation was part of the principles in school from the beginning, kids would just have no problem at all with that.
Yeah.
And they would learn easily, and they would be very comfortable with that for the rest of their life. So it's that's, we learn not to participate. That's what we learn in school.
And then leaders or facilitators come into organizations to help teams to relearn that. And if I may, I would love to come back to your do and don't list for a moment.
Sure.
I was lucky enough that you shared it with me beforehand. And what I find interesting, inspiring on the don'ts, on the organization part, there's don't allow bureaucracy, don't allow hierarchy, and don't be a yes man or allow them to be a yes man. And for me, these are the things that you very explicitly break with a general tradition, or this is how we do things. So what does it take to then really fulfill your don'ts? Because I can imagine that, yes, it's nice to read that. And the way you explained, we go in the woods and I share them, or I bring them to Korea and then we have a conversation. It all sounds hunky-glory. But there is very deep stuff in that not everyone would agree with.
Yeah, I think that um, and here again, this is the contrast with in the way organization, my at least organization function when I was working, which was traditional. The way to live up to some of those things were meant two things. One is you could do it on the downside of what you were responsible for by really working on it, and investing a fair amount of time in developing that kind of atmosphere and the relationship and becoming credible and so forth. And you never succeeded completely because there was still a bunch of people that wouldn't come along. They, they couldn't do it. Okay. So those people that could do it in a small group could not do it with me. So those people that could, if you were to put them in a small group of, they would speak up there. They wouldn't speak with me if I was in the small group, for instance. Or so, and I'm saying this, although we didn't do small group because I didn't know anything about this. Okay. So, and as far as I was concerned, to behave in a way that was consistent with what I wrote there meant taking a certain amount of risk with my superiors. It's sort of a bit of a, okay, Henry disagrees. Okay, what have you got to say? Everybody agrees. I don't agree. In our senior management meeting, it happened quite often, that sort of a thing. Oh, Henry again, and because it was easier for everybody to not, after a presentation had been made and there'd been some discussions, that's fine. Yeah. Excuse me. And so it worked for me because it was a really great company, number one, and number two, I was always successful. So that was my my results were impeccable and usually superior to many others, and so it's I got away with it, and of course when I was in Scandinavia it was easy because I was far out. People didn't even know where Finland was, and it's no problem. But the numbers spoke for themselves. And so when I was in my role as in staff position, that was more difficult because I didn't have numbers. I didn't have results as a staff person. And then I went back into a line management with a responsibility for various countries, and then it was fine because I had results again. Then I was
prove that your methods work.
And I guess I'm a pain in the neck, but I'm a nice guy.
And so, and luckily you were, because otherwise all of this wouldn't have emerged.
Yeah, but it's funny the way it sort of happened. It isn't, and the connection between those pieces, because you were talking about the principles. If you look at the 10 principles and you look at the do's and don'ts, there is a lot of common ground, and that's good. Actually, it would have been disturbing if it was the other way around.
Yes, it makes it very consistent.
But I am still amazed, even though I've been in contact with this, of how quickly people work together, relate, and communicate when you put them in small groups.
Yeah.
And I haven't been to one for a little while, but I get invited to workshops that are run by other people, and I am the thing. I remember the last one I think I was in France, in Paris, and the thing that amazes me always is here is a room where you have maybe, let's say, 30, that kind of number, 30 strangers, people who don't know each other, have never met. Yeah. And this workshop starts, and within less than an hour, that room is buzzing. And people are talking to each other, and they are leaning into, towards each other. And you can tell that something has happened that is very special. Because if you put 30 strangers in a regular meeting, you're not going to get that kind of a thing.
Not if you don't have a structure and you break them into smaller groups and to make it safe. And as you were sharing before, when you were the air quotes difficult one, I just realized that actually the trick is to create a space where it's easier and encouraged to ask the difficult questions and engage with the content. Because that's what we need. Because otherwise there's a huge risk if presentations are given and nobody asks a question. Everyone says that they agree just because either they're tired and it's after the lunch break, or they don't want to be the difficult ones, or they don't want more work.
Well, but it is also the way it is designed, because the people that give the presentations, at least the ones that are, if there is substance there, the ones that are smart enough, what they do is that they go and talk to the people, the management team, beforehand to make sure that there is not going to be any controversy. So, it's rigged in a way. So, but it is, that's the system, people think this is normal. That's the way it should be. And so you have this very expensive bunch of people, that are essentially not really producing anything. You have nice conversation, but there is no output.
Yeah.
You have
and a wrong sense of efficiency.
That is quite common, I think. Yeah. I don't think. Pardon?
It's a wrong sense of efficiency.
I don't think my experience was exceptional. I think it was because the group of people that was in the room were really good people. They were good, they were smart, they were competent, and they were good people. I mean, they were likable. There was nothing particularly, negative to say about them. But as a group, didn't generate much because of the way the thing was designed.
Would you then say that the first step for organizational change is to change the way people meet?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, there is also at the bottom of this something even more fundamental, and that is that if you meet without an objective that is worthwhile, you are not going to have a productive meeting. I mean, if you, and that was quite common, that you have an agenda, but you don't really have objectives. At least, it's not specific enough to be clear whether you have achieved it or not. It was possible, in the absence of something really clear, it was possible not to get there because there was no there. So you have a good discussion. Oh, we had a good review, and there was some important observation that were made by Joe and by Peter and by Mary, and everybody felt good. Okay, let's move on to the next topic.
Yeah.
Approved. We approve. Yeah.
What do you think most people would get wrong about the liberating? Because exploration call, I found this very interesting, and I didn't want to go deeper just to keep my curiosity. When you mentioned the structure, what, so what, now what?
You broke up. Can you start from the beginning? What do
Yes.
you think? And I lost you.
I would be curious to hear your thoughts on what you think where people are using or not using the full potential of the structures because maybe they're underestimating them or using them in the wrong way. And I remember you mentioning the example of the what, so what, now what, and the power it could have.
Mm-hmm. Okay, you're breaking up again, but I will answer and then tell me if I break up as well. But you are, I'm not. So the first thing is that, and this is where, facilitation really can make a difference. That if you use something like what, so what, now what, as simple as it is, it does require, in order to be effective, that people see what there is to see to answer the question, what? Mm-hmm. So not everybody needs to see and notice everything, but the group as a whole has to be able to see things that happen that deserve to be paid attention to. Okay, and the reality is that, as silly as it sounds, is that it's quite amazing what people don't see, because there is a bunch of things that are so, I suppose the explanation is that there's a bunch of things that are so normal that they become invisible.
Mm.
And so
and then it requires the beginner's mindset.
Interrupts somebody. Yeah, I have a you're breaking up again. You are freezing and breaking up.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know if it's from my side. Are you having problem with my thing also, or?
No. Speed test. And okay. I just received the glass fiber, high speed, whatever. Anyway, but now it's working.
Okay. Yeah, no, I was saying that it's amazing what people will not see. So if you don't start with that as a base, you're gonna miss it at the end, particularly if the what includes something that are really important. And and I mean, that's been my experience. I have a story which I won't get into because it would take more time than it should be. But I have a story about, it's one of my facilitation experience, actually, when I was doing a workshop in South Africa with a group of people, and I was in their meeting observing what was going on, and we did the what, so what, now what. And at the what level, none of the members, so there was one woman and the rest of us was all men, none of the men noticed that this woman didn't say anything during the discussion. And she was the one that should have been the most vocal about that subject, because it was a personal issue and she was in charge of HR. And I was waiting, and I was, but this was, excuse me, I missed something. She was black. And all the men executives were white.
Mm.
Important detail. Okay. So, so one of the things that I remember that made a difference that somebody did is that I think facility is essential in every meeting. So it's either going to be done by whoever's in charge of the meeting, assuming that person is capable of doing that, or somebody else has to do it. And so one other thing that was done, since you don't necessarily have facilitator, one other thing that was done, and it's a great way to learn by somebody in one organization, was that whenever there is a meeting, whoever puts something on the agenda will facilitate, will decide the design, and they will be explicit, and they will facilitate. Because if it isn't done that way, then the boss becomes the facilitator indirectly,
Yeah.
It either falls on his or her shoulder, or then, so if you don't have some kind of explicit way of making those arrangements so that they become routine, because I don't think organizations can have, hundreds of facilitators just waiting to show up at the meeting. So the competence has to be distributed to everybody. Essentially, everybody should be able to do that. I mean, it's not
rocket science.
It's not difficult if you use something like Liberating Structure or something similar to that. It is not. You don't have to be a superstar. It's more a matter of but the attention to all the aspects that have nothing to do with the content of the discussion is very, it's almost like you have to pay attention to everything else that is than what is normally paid attention to. Because if you, in a normal meeting, people pay attention to the content, to the subject matter. If you want to facilitate, you want to pay attention to everything else, who participates and how come, and what are the really the dynamics, did the group function, so it's not a content issue, it's a interaction issue and that kind of thing. And what I call the space in between, paying attention to the space in between people, what's going on there, and it's not difficult, it's quite feasible, but it needs to be done, and it's not done.
Yeah.
When you talk about what, so what, now what is not done either is to have a really effective debrief at the end of meetings, so that you don't do the same stupid thing at the next meeting. That's not done. And particularly, there are topics that are not touched on because they are sensitive, they are personal, like behavior. And so, you're dealing with some very basic things in a way, but they are so common that it sort of goes on and on and on.
Yeah, and the basic things makes me think of how you do one thing is how you do everything. And if
try to articulate that a little bit for me.
I'm thinking of when we shy away of these difficult discussions after a meeting, if we don't look at how do we meet in our weekly get-together, why is it that some don't participate or don't share their honest opinion? And if we don't debrief on that, this is how we will do everything in the organization. not
Yeah,
including all voices, shying away of the difficult topics, putting under the carpet what doesn't want to be heard. And this is then where big risks emerge or mistakes happen.
yeah. And the difficult aspect of that is that it starts at the top.
Mm, always.
And so if both ways, because if the people at the top start doing the right thing, meaning let's say the men at the top or the woman at the top, the likelihood that the next level will imitate that is pretty good, and then it can cascade, down. But the reverse is also true, and which is fortunately not automatic, and that's why you have always pockets of good work that are taking place in organizations, no matter what is going on elsewhere, and because you have some people, some groups that are up to that. Let's put it that way. That this, but it's yeah, and I think I used to blame people, and I think that it is still valid to some extent, but I really think that the big issue is that we don't learn how to do it, that people don't know better. They do what they have learned to do. And, it's not, there are many more people with goodwill in organization than what show up because they don't know better.
And I think toxic behavior is contagious. And that's a problem, that it's faster to destroy psychological safety and to get individuals into the fight, flight, freeze, and into this automatic behavior that is destructive than the other way around.
It's difficult to have toxic behavior when you use the right structure. You froze again.
Yeah.
You froze again.
Yeah. I heard it's difficult to have toxic behavior if you have the right structures.
Yeah. I mean, you and I could have a toxic conversation, but it's difficult because there's just the two of us.
And there's enough curiosity.
Yeah, and it's...
What was your main facilitation challenge when you facilitated?
You have to repeat because it is not coming through. I don't know. What was you started?
I was curious
about. That's all I heard.
So despite, and you spoke about the relevant, no? Can you hear me? Test.
Yeah, try again. Yeah. You spoke about the relevant.
You spoke about the relevance of facilitation. And I would be curious, as I ask every guest, of your facilitation challenge back then. What was difficult?
Nothing. First of all, I'm not a facilitator, so I haven't done much of it at all. And I really haven't had any problem because my reflexes are more connected to my professional experience. So I don't react as a facilitator. I react more as a leader of the group that is trying to resolve a problem. So I don't have any hesitation or, I mean, I try to be careful and nice and that kind of thing, but I don't.
And I find it interesting that the way you explained your management style and how you led groups and how you showed up for groups, for me, that is facilitation. So I think the qualities of a leader and of a facilitator are very often the same, because both bring forth the best in groups. They
Well, if you have a meeting and you're in charge of the meeting and there is no facilitator, and you are in charge, you are the facilitator. Whether you facilitate or don't, you are, in fact, there is no choice. And it is much easier to have somebody else do it, because it's hard to do both things at the same time well.
participate and facilitate, I mean.
Well, it occupies similar regions in the brain, maybe, or in somewhere, that you have to pay attention. And it's a little bit like, the eyes and the ears. It's like if you have really to pay attention to what you're looking at, and at the same time to listen. It's really difficult, I think, to do that well. I suppose it becomes easier when a group gets used to work in a certain way, and then you don't have to get, you're not over inundated by things. But I like the system of having somebody gets to be the facilitator in every meeting, whoever it is, whether it's the boss or not the boss, but there has to be one that is responsible for that, and that totally focused on paying attention to this and that and so forth. And it's also important, because the thing that I'm not sure that, most facilitator, I'm not sure if they do that or don't do that, and under what circumstances. Feedback is needed if you are the facilitator. And usually feedback is not particularly pleasant to give.
Or to receive.
Although the feedback includes what was good, there is also what was not good. And that's important. I mean, the what, so what, now what is in order to pick up things that need to be done differently. And that means putting your finger where it hurts and saying, this was not good. This was out of place. This was, rude. This was whatever, or I think, so this is where having someone that is, and it can be a member of the meeting. It doesn't have to be an outsider at all. In fact, I think it's better if it is someone in the meeting, because you pass that role around so that everybody does it. And I think it sort of gradually opens the door for people to be more and more competent, first of all, in terms of really seeing things, noticing things, and then candid about sharing, and so I think there is great value in that, and it is something. It's again another one of those things that's not done, and one issue is, I suspect that one of the person that needs to be made aware of what he or she is doing is the boss. So that's the most difficult person to address and say, you screwed up here. Here's what you did wrong. Boom, 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 boom. Go get another job. But seriously, I mean, it's not I'm kind of making a joke out of it, but it is a big thing. And it's more to me than just the matter of what results are we going to get. totally changes the quality of life at work. And when you're, I've had the pleasure of experiencing it. When you are with a group that functions, it feels good. You have a good time. You get things done, but you have a good time. You get along, etc. You laugh, you joke, you pull each other leg, you do all kinds of things, and that are, it's a little family, and that's worth the investment, and I am convinced that you also get much better results as a consequence of that.
Absolutely. And there's research on that, right?
Yeah, but the idea of being miserable at work, I am not in favor of that. But
Yeah.
it's
real.
It's a very real problem, and it's not real. I think the majority of people have just accepted that that's the way it is. C'est la vie.
Mm.
I have to do it so I can put food on the table.
And still, from what I take away from this conversation is that everyone carries a part of the responsibility and everyone can actually change something. So even if it's a small group intervention, adding some structure, seeing what you can control and what you cannot.
But the boss has the greater responsibility in giving people the freedom to do that.
Yeah.
At the minimum, the permission, and hopefully more than that. But it starts with permission.
Mm-hmm.
And the fear. One of the CEO that in the company that I work with was a very competitive, great guy. But competition was big thing for him. So he came up with this notion that this management team that worked under him, that he would set it up so that they would compete to arrive at a decision of who would replace him.
Mm.
And well, the consequence of that was that it was a totally dysfunctional group. Because it's very difficult to compete first
and then find collaboration again. Yeah.
Instead of the other way around could work. If you have collaboration first and competition second, that probably works. I mean, because that's something we are familiar with in sport, for instance.
Yeah.
And yes. But it's so this has been for me, if I may say so myself, this has been a revelation, this liberating structures. I didn't start with that in mind, or it's been, and it still amazes me. I still have the same reaction. How can something so simple make such a difference? I have seen people do, I love Troika consulting, and I have seen people do that. And so many times I walk around the room and just look at the faces of the person that is, being given a content, and looking at the faces and at the smiles and at the, it's a treat.
Yes.
And you say, how come this is not universally known all over the world? How come you don't, it's
it is. And it's so funny. I told you about the community that I built, never done before. So we were all about doing things we've never done before. And we were all obsessed with Troika consulting. So at one point we tried so many variations of Troika consulting that we almost planned a Troika-thon, a marathon of variations of Troika consulting sessions, because it's just wonderful. Where the Troika without words. So what if you can just use your body to share feedback?
Which we do in any case.
Yes, yes, and sometimes we don't need any words. They're just confusing. What if everyone spoke their mother tongue, so we didn't understand the words of what someone is using? Can we still get good advice? Yes, we can. So that's so you have inspired an entire community and variations. The Troika.
So,
what is it that you would? What is the advice that you would give your younger self?
I don't know. Just.
Or what did you wish you'd known before?
I don't know. You know, I find myself very fortunate and particularly because I don't know if I can use the word allowed, or just allowed myself to drift from, you know, one unpredictable event to the other. You know, I didn't, but I didn't do it on purpose because I didn't know. It just, you know, I did it. You know, I let go of control sufficiently in my life for things to happen. And then things happened to me that are really, you know, like I had an accident. Accidents are not controllable. You don't do that on purpose. But so I think that the instincts I had were pretty good. You know, I mean, I was always, relationships were big for me always. You know, I didn't have large circles, and you know, but I always had one good friend or two, and that's it. And I, you know, so from the, you know, from the beginning, even the first, there was always somebody that was, and that's you know, I got, even my first job was at Anheuser-Busch, and the work itself was a big disappointment, but there had a couple of friends there that were absolutely great, and we had a wonderful time together. But the relationship, I think, you know, I think that's what makes the difference. You know, what call that the space in between, you know, and paying attention to that that's primary, not secondary. You know, it's more important than the work itself or the results. And so it's the source, it's through relationships that everything gets either accomplished or screwed up, or, I mean, they are fundamental, you know. And we probably experienced the whole range, all of us, you know, from totally unproductive, you know, relationships with, you know, conflictual or whatever, with people that we absolutely can't get along with, all the way to people with whom it's just it's a pleasure. We remain friends forever. You know, I've had this pleasure of several people, most of the people, I would say, that work for me directly. You know, we remain friends forever. To this day, I still have you know, and that's not only great emotionally and rewarding, it's effective. It works.
Yeah.
It's a source of performance, absolutely. And the trust is a huge thing. I mean, I'm a little obsessive about not a little, totally obsessive. I think that particularly with the kind of work that I was doing, having people in different countries reporting to me, trust was at the core.
Mm.
I can't trust you. You can't work for me. I mean, it's
Yeah.
that simple. There were no degrees. It's either, and I mean, nobody's perfect, but
And there's no shortcut for trust. And it's these, and I think the structures you developed, they encourage the trust building process and really
yeah,
help that.
yeah, because you have to earn it. You don't, it's, it's not a very predictable process, and it's easy to do dumb thing that you're not even aware of.
Yeah.
And so it takes time, but it's worth it. I mean, it's the same as on the personal level.
Mm.
Never mind the professional level. It's the same thing on the personal level. I mean, if you don't have trust, what kind of friendship do you have? Yeah. So,
Yeah.
uh, but you're right. I mean, those spaces make it possible. And Troika, we were talking about Troika. I mean, people discover that they can get help from
Mm.
others.
Yes.
Wow, how
Yes.
about that? That's an innovation,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's there is hope.
Yes. There is hope and there's deep gratitude for your work. And
Yeah, I hope it spreads. I mean, I have told you, I think the first time we talked, that what I hope is that kids would learn some of this stuff in school because it's so simple. And, uh, they don't resist. They don't have any, you know,
mm.
20-year-old bad habits that they have to change. They would just take this with no problem at all, and they would learn to collaborate, not
Yeah.
just one, but with a large group. And it's it's a big deal, but
It is.
it's not
Work in
simple.
progress. Work in progress.
Well, you have generation of habits and bureaucracy and fear and all sorts
Right.
of all
Yeah.
sorts of obstacles to, and it's too simple. It's not exciting. It's too simple.
um, yeah, is it? It gets exciting because of the simplicity. The excitement happens within. But yeah,
Yeah, but you understand what I mean when I say
yeah,
it's too simple.
yeah. People don't want to see it, and I think it's simplicity, and that's where it is difficult because it goes to the core,
Well,
and it really shakes up the power structures, hierarchies, everything that many have worked hard to maintain.
yeah,
Um,
and there is
so
also, yeah, I mean, there's a big deal. I mean, we're talking about kids learning in school. That means that teacher have to be willing to let go of control.
yes, exactly. And same for organizations, as we discussed in your share.
But
That's dangerous, scary.
and it's yeah. So you are going to take this whole mess and make something that works?
Yes.
Oh boy.
Well, we will have a few edits and then it will be released to the world. And I want to thank you for your time and sharing your experience, expertise, life lessons with me on behalf of the audience. It really means a lot.
Well, thank you. It was fun. I enjoy conversation. And so the next conversation we have, which you don't have to record, you have to ask more difficult questions.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't embarrass me, you didn't make me sweat, you didn't make me uncomfortable.
It doesn't sound like it doesn't sound like a compliment.
No,
Okay,
no,
well,
no, I'm just kidding. It was a pleasure, really.
yes, yes. And I
Thank you.
hope for another conversation.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I mean, we don't have to make recording, we can just talk.
Absolutely.
You take good care of yourself, and I am looking forward to the finished product.
Yes, I will share it with you. And the one-page summary. This will
Okay.
be a challenge.
Uh-huh.
Thank you.
You can use the do's and don'ts.
Yes. Oh, I will.
Take
Bye.
care.
And
Bye.
you. Bye bye.
Good rest of the day. Bye
And
bye.
you.